issues facing America.
Stand by on camera, go.
Ready to join the movement? Then welcome to the big picture. Joining me for tonight's Lone Liberal Rumble are David Laska, Director of Communications to the New York Republican State Committee, who's visiting from our New York studios, and NealAsbury, host of the Truth for America radio show, who joins us from Miami. And David and Neal, welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Tom.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you with us. And just so we all know, and so our viewers know, there's just a very slight delay in the feed to and from New York. So, you know, anyhow, we'll do our very best with this. The votes are in. Prop 1, which mandates a $15 living wage for airport and hotel workers in the Seattle suburb of SeaTac, has passed. Voters approved Prop 1 by a 77-vote margin, so recount will probably happen. But even that fact that it reached that point is amazing in and of itself. It also ties that minimum wage, $15 an hour, to the inflation index. It ensures that tipped workers don't have to share tips with their employers, and it guarantees a 6.5% paid 6.5 paid sick leave days per year for every worker. Prop 1 also exempts most small businesses, genuine small businesses, from these requirements. So why not make Prop 1 a national requirement? You know, what's wrong with this, Neal?
Well, Tom, does anyone truly believe that we have a job crisis in this country? 26 million unemployed and underemployed Americans because the minimum wage is too low?
Yes.
Come on, you know, since the minimum wage has been created,
if minimum wage
there's
workers had
empirical
more money
evidence
in their pockets, it would stimulate the economy. It has done it every single time the minimum wage has been raised since 1935, Neal. You cannot identify one single year since 1935 when raising the minimum wage failed to stimulate the economy and make things better.
The liberal solution for everything is to spend somebody else's money. The problem is that in the Obama economy, we're not creating jobs.
Neal, it's not somebody else's money. It is these workers' money. They are earning this money. They are making the products. They are doing the works, and they're making the profits that are being skimmed off the top for the fat cats who aren't working, who are sitting around their desks, or who are like Paris Hilton, are sitting around their pool waiting for the dividend. But David, let me bring you in on this. Why shouldn't we simply raise the minimum wage? I mean, we don't have to take it to $15 an hour. We can take it back to where it was in 1968 when it worked just fine, thank you very much, at $10.10 an hour.
I'll tell you what, Tom, I think what happened in SeaTac is a perfect example of how we can protect workers without needing a massive one-size-fits-all federally mandated minimum wage. The people in this small town of 27,000 took a look at these two industries. They only applied the minimum wage increase to the airline industry and the hotel industry. And they said, we can raise them here, and as you pointed out, they exempted small businesses, and crucially, they gave unions and employers the right to waive the state mandate if it's not working out. So this is a way we can actually raise the minimum wage without killing jobs. So I think this actually speaks sort of why we shouldn't do this on a large federal way, as you tend to support doing.
So you're suggesting, David, that every community in America should have a referendum on their own local minimum wage?
I'm saying at the state level, at the county level, or even at the town level, like they did in SeaTac. You know, there are 50 states in this country and thousands of towns, each with different economies, each with different cottage industries. The same minimum wage doesn't work across the entire country.
I don't disagree with you on
federal
that.
Minimum wage.
And that's why I say, you know, $10.10 an hour, which is the, you know, used to be the federal minimum wage in today's dollars back in '68. Would be at least a floor. According to a study from the Economic Policy Institute, increasing the national minimum wage from $7.25 to $10.10 an hour by July 1st, 2015 would result in a net increase in economic activity of approximately $32.6 billion, and over that period would generate approximately 144,000 new jobs. So, Neal, what do you have against 144,000 new jobs and $30 billion in additional economic activity?
Tom, we're going to disagree. The evidence clearly shows that jobs are lost. It also shows that there's going to be a shift to more part-time jobs.
What evidence?
Already the part-time jobs are killing this country.
They are, because our minimum wage hasn't gone up since 1968.
People who are working part-time are more likely 5 times to live in poverty than those working full-time.
So let's raise the minimum wage.
You're going to push them. You're going to push employment out of these communities, Tom. That's the problem. Let's create an environment where entrepreneurialism can flourish and we can create good-paying jobs in this country. I'm not satisfied with $9 an hour, but you don't mandate it from the government. You're just going to destroy businesses that way, Tom. It's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That way, Neil. It has never happened
Businesses
that way.
are going to leave the community, more poverty, more people in despair.
Okay, I'll leave you with the last word on that, and our viewers can make up their own mind. South Carolina rejected the Obamacare Medicaid expansion, but that doesn't mean that Medicaid won't be expanding in the Palmetto State. According to state officials, South Carolina's Medicaid rolls are expected to grow by 16% by June of 2015. According to Kaiser Health News, that's actually a higher growth rate than expected in many states that did accept the Obamacare Medicaid expansion. You're seeing the wonders of Republican economics and politics at work here. The Obamacare, because poverty is increasing there. The Obamacare Medicaid expansion allows people making up to 133% of the poverty level to sign up for Medicaid benefits. In states that allowed the expansion, the federal government's going to cover 100% of the cost of that for the first 3 years and 90% forever after that. But South Carolinians, they're going to have to pay for it themselves. This is totally bizarre. South Carolinians paid all of them who worked pretty much paid federal taxes. They paid federal taxes, which goes into the federal payroll, into the federal budget. And then Obamacare says, oh, and by the way, we'll take 100% of the cost of Medicaid for the first 3 years, 90% forever, and we will give you, the taxpayers of South Carolina, we'll give you your own money back. Why is Nick Haley preventing the taxpayers from South Carolina from getting their own money back from the federal government, David?
Well, so basically what the Obama administration is telling these governors is, if you like your level of Medicaid spending, you can keep your level of Medicaid spending. I don't blame any of these Republican governors for being afraid of taking on a massive expansion in Medicaid, which is already unsustainable, which is already the most bloated, wasteful, fraud-fraught government program.
David, you're not answering my question. You're not answering my question. John Kasich said, I'm going to allow the taxpayers of Ohio to get back the money that they paid in taxes to the federal government.
If it works in
Jan
Ohio,
Brewer in Arizona said, I'm going to let the taxpayers of Arizona get back from the federal government the tax money that they pay to the federal government. Why is it that Nikki Haley and all these, not all these, but so many of these other Republicans are saying, we're going to continue to send federal tax money to Washington, D.C., but when it comes to Washington, D.C. giving us tax money back, nah, sorry, we don't want it. We don't want our taxpayers to have their own money back. I don't get it.
Well, Tom, that's because nobody believes that the government can do this efficiently. And whatever the government is telling us, there's no trust there anymore. Well, the American people don't trust Obama anymore, and they definitely don't trust him on Obamacare.
It's a contract, Neil. It doesn't require trust. It's a contract. It's a law.
Cost escalation. Cost escalation. And let's talk about Medicaid for a second. Just because you have Medicaid doesn't mean you have doctors and hospitals. They're dropping Medicaid in droves, Tom, and the people who really need Medicaid will not have it because of this.
And if the taxpayers of South Carolina got their own tax dollars back from the federal government, they might be able to be taking that money into those hospitals.
The tragedy is, Tom, you're taking away Medicaid from the people who really need
billions of dollars from hospitals in the poorest neighborhoods in these states, we wouldn't need the expansion to begin with. So,
no,
these
David, wait a minute, David. You know that in the states that are saying we're not going to take back our own tax dollars, we're not going, where the Republican governors are saying we're not going to allow the tax-paying people of the state of Texas, where Rick Perry says, I'm not going to allow the taxpayers of Texas who paid federal dollars into the federal government, I'm not going to allow them to take that money back in the form of Medicaid health care dollars. It's not going to happen.
In those states,
right across the board, you are now seeing hospitals going out of business because the way the law was constructed did not expect the Supreme Court to be able to allow Rick Perry to refuse to take federal dollars. So
right,
why
it was
is
a massive federal power grab from the beginning? And look, I guess these hospitals closing in some of the poorest neighborhoods in America, this was one of those great things about Obamacare that we would find out about after we passed it, all right? These hospitals were open before this law was passed. They're closing now, and they can't stay open without a massive incursion of federal power and a massive assumption of financial liability on behalf of
They can't stay open without the governor saying, yes, we will take back the tax dollars that we already gave you. But speaking of Obamacare, on Monday, the Supreme Court
and the outlying years accept a whole bunch of other liabilities.
The Supreme Court on Monday agreed to hear the case of Sibelius versus Hobby Lobby stores. This is an Obamacare story. Hobby Lobby, an Oklahoma-based arts and crafts store, claims that the Obamacare birth control birth control mandate violates their First Amendment right to religious freedom. Now, this is, Hobby Lobby's kind of a right-wing store to begin with, but where it gets really weird is that Hobby Lobby always used to provide birth control to their employees until suddenly Obamacare came along, number one. And number two, when is it that corporations got to have religion? Are they going to get married next? I don't get it. David, fill me in on this.
Well, first of all, if you want to call Hobby Lobby a right-wing company, we'll take it, because this is a company that gives 10% of their annual revenue away to charity. They have a self-imposed minimum wage of $14 an hour. They currently do offer 14 of the 20, actually, I'm sorry, it's 16 of the 20 means of birth control required under Obamacare. However, this is a privately owned company, and you're asking one family that owns this company to pay for the morning after pill and the week after pill, and what essentially amounts to forcing them to pay for abortion.
Okay, so
if
David,
religious freedom means anything in this country anymore,
if the Green family that owns this company, instead of being evangelical Christians who do not believe in birth control pills, if they were instead Christian Scientists who don't believe in antibiotics, should they be allowed to offer a health insurance plan which does not pay for antibiotics or hospitalization, but only pays for prayer?
Well, here's the difference in the hypothetical you just gave in reality. In reality, in reality, the abortion issue is who's not paying for antibiotics? Name one employer. I mean, that's absurd. Absolutely.
There are people all across the country who are not paying
whether
for
or not
antibiotics.
antibiotics ought to be
Secondly,
covered.
the second group that the Supreme Court decided to take their case was either the Amish or the Mennonites. And so you may be getting into some of these issues. I mean, if the Supreme Court, Neil, we just have a minute. I don't want to hear your thoughts on this. If the Supreme Court says that your religion can determine what kind of health care you're offering, and Christian Science is a major and credible religion, isn't this what's next?
Well, I think it's apples and oranges.
That's a bridge too far.
What the bigger issue here is the liberal view that they just totally disrespect the proud tradition of religion in this country. I mean, religion in this country is under assault, and this is just the last wave of. So
Christian Science business owners should be able to tell their employees, "Sorry, you can't have any penicillin."
We have conscientious objectors in this country. I mean, you have a proud tradition in this country.
Conscientious objectors are dealing with the government, not private employers.
Well, corporations in this country act as private citizens. I mean, that's you mentioned in the earlier part of the show. The way that they are incorporated is to do good for their communities. They have the image, they have the protection of private citizens. Okay. So why shouldn't their religious
actually, in many ways, they don't. I mean, that's a canard. We're going to have to get back to this. More of tonight's Lone Liberal Rumble right after the break. Welcome back. With me for tonight's Lone Liberal Rumble are David Laska and Neil Asbury, and let's get back to it. This Friday is Black Friday, the day when American retailers offer killer one-day deals on products throughout their stores. This year, however, Black Friday will be more like a Black Thursday because stores like Toys R Us, Best Buys, Kmart, and of course Walmart will start offering special Black Friday sales on Thanksgiving Day itself. Walmart will actually be open all day. The deals will start at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Can we all agree, and let me start with you, David, that some days are for family and friends and not for work? Why not pass a ban on certain types of businesses staying open in Thanksgiving?
Absolutely, Tom. As soon as we get done here, I'm hopping a train to Connecticut. Thanksgiving is for being with your family, not for saving an extra 10% on Game of Thrones DVDs. I think there is some hope, though. A University of Connecticut poll found that 49% of Americans disapprove of the idea of shopping on Thanksgiving. Only 16% are happy with it. So look, if those 16% want to go stand in line and fight their food comas to save a few bucks on an Xbox, let them go nuts. But I think that's pretty absurd.
Okay, and Neil, it seems that David is in favor of big government saying, no, you can't do business on Thanksgiving.
To me, this is a nanny state issue. We don't need the government to be telling us that. Let the local communities decide.
Well, Maine, Rhode
what
Island,
is
and
right
Massachusetts all have blue laws barring big box and
Well,
department
then
stores.
let the states, that's exactly right. Let it be a states' right issue. Let the states decide. Let the communities decide. We don't need the federal government telling us when to shop and when not to shop.
Why not?
Because it's not their role to do. I mean, it's the national.
Actually, if you look at the Constitution, the federal government is given the right to regulate commerce among and between the various states.
Well, let the local communities decide what their constituents want. The big government, the nanny state.
Under the Constitution, any company that does business in more than one state could be regulated by the federal government. Only small, independently, locally owned companies couldn't be. I mean, it's right there in the Constitution.
Well, Tom, and like you said, some states have blue laws and other states don't.
Okay.
And so it's a perfect.
Well, here's how out of control, in my opinion, it's gotten. And David, I'd like to get your take on this. Tony Rohr, who was the general manager of Pizza Hut in Elkhart, Indiana, was fired from his job this week for refusing to open his store on Thanksgiving Day. WSB-TV, SBT-TV covered the story for local TV. Check it out.
Tony says it wasn't about him, it was about his employees. He told his bosses that he would not open the restaurant he managed on Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving and Christmas are the only 2 days that they're closed in the whole year, and they're only 2 days that those people are guaranteed to have off to spend with their families.
Rohr says he was told to sign a letter of resignation. He refused. Instead, he wrote a letter explaining his position to his boss. He says this is a copy of it. In the letter, he wrote, quote, "I am not quitting. I do not resign. However, I accept that the refusal to comply with this greedy, immoral request means the end of my tenure with this company." His letter went on to say, quote, "I hope you realize that it's the people at the bottom of the totem pole that make your life possible." We tried contacting...
Meanwhile, David Novak, the CEO of Yum Brands, the parent company of Pizza Hut, made $12 million last year, $1 million a month, and $150 million, and is sitting on $150 million in stock options. Don't you think he can afford to give his employees a day off? Neil?
Oh, for sure.
Well,
and hey, I'm with Tony.
That's a personal
Look, if my
decision.
BlackBerry goes off tomorrow, I'm hitting ignore.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and Neil?
No, that's a personal decision. I mean, hey, maybe this is not the right company for him. It's a free economy out there. If he doesn't get along with management, he has the perfect right to go find somewhere else to work, and the company has the right to.
So Neil, you support
policies.
Yum Brands for firing him. David, do you?
Hey, Tom, for the record, my company's closed on Thursday and Friday and Saturday.
No, but you
Sunday
support the
too.
right of the company to fire him. I'm wondering if David does.
I support the right of the company to fire them. I think it's immoral, but I don't think it ought to be illegal. And I'm with Neil. The government shouldn't be standing in and telling companies when they're allowed to open and when they can't be. I think it's stupid. I think it's classless, frankly. They ought to let anyone take off Thanksgiving who wants to. But, hey, free country.
Yeah, okay. According to yeah, I was going to tell you a story, but it's we'll move along. According to the most recent Reuters, Americans support the temporary Iranian nuclear deal by a whopping 2-to-1 margin. 44% of those polled supported the deal, 22% oppose it. So first of all, David, you first. Do you support or oppose this deal as it seems to be incarnated right now?
I oppose it, and I suspect the American people will come to as well. I mean, look, we have to be a little skeptical of any poll that comes out a day or two before Thanksgiving and asks about a major piece of international, diplomacy that came out on the Sunday morning before Thanksgiving. I think this deal, just like everything else that has come out of this woeful Obama presidency, the more the American people learn about it, the more they'll be against it. And that's because, look, I mean, liberal foreign policy in a nutshell is encapsulated in this agreement. We're asking a rogue nation to very nicely abandon their weapons program in return for something nice and money in this case.
Country in 200 years, David.
You feel comfortable with letting Iran have a nuclear bomb? They're a state sponsor of terror. They're a state sponsor of terrorism. They funnel money to terrorists who blow up buses and cafes in Israel. I would call that a rogue nation. We have been a state sponsor of terrorism for years and years and years. We were the ones who funded bin Laden. All right,
we got him started. Neil,
if you really want to compare the two,
I'm curious your
we're
take
pretty
on this,
far
Neil.
apart, Tom.
Yeah, we clearly are.
Tom, first of all, the poll that you mentioned, about a third of Americans had no opinion on it. So as David said, I mean, everyone's focused on jobs and Obamacare.
It was
They're not
yes
thinking about
42,
this right
no
now.
22.
But a third had no opinion. But the other thing is this, is that the Iranian leadership has been taking victory laps the last couple of days, saying that they won, they're not giving up their nuclear capability. But the poll that I'm really
Nuclear
keyed
power
on right now,
capability.
well, no, they're
very clear about this.
They're on their way to a nuclear weapon, whether we like it or not, and this is not the way to prevent them to get there.
All right.
But the poll that we should look at is Obama's trustworthiness right now. Obama's going to have to sell this thing, and if the American people don't trust him, he's not going to be able to sell it. Already the Democrat members of the Senate is bailing on him, so I don't think he's going to get this done.
I don't think he's going to have a problem with it at all. I think people have a common sense on this. One last thing I want to share with you guys. The Pope just came out and called out Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is the only president in the history of the United States, and frankly, I think probably the only world leader who's ever used the phrase trickle-down economics to describe his own policies. And the Pope says, and I quote, "Some people continue to defend trickle-down theories which assume that economic growth encouraged by a free market will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by the facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power. We end up being incapable of feeling compassion at the outcry of the poor. This culture of prosperity deadens us." And then he goes on to say, while the earnings of the minority are growing exponentially, so too is the gap separating the majority from the prosperity enjoyed by those happy few. This imbalance is the result of ideologies which defend the absolute autonomy of the marketplace. I mean, he's taken on Reagan head on. How are you guys going to deal with this?
Well, I'll start off by saying I have the complete admiration for the Pope and for the Catholic religion, but I will tell you he's got this one wrong. If we are going to get people working, if we're going to lift up the millions and millions of people in this world that are hurting, we need to inspire our entrepreneurial community to get out there and invest and take risk and create jobs. And that's
so
what
Jesus would have given tax cuts to billionaires too.
What you call Reaganomics, it was inspiring the entrepreneurial class of the world to get out there and create jobs.
32 years it's destroyed the middle class of this country. David, your shot at this.
Yeah, look, I don't think Pope Francis is a bad guy, but I'm going to come at this from a little different angle. He talks about compassion. I think if there's one large organization on the planet that really can't claim the moral high ground on anything, it's the Catholic Church. I think Pope Francis ought to stick to preaching about the Bible and whatever it is he does,
but they have been at the
leave
forefront
economics to
of a lot of progressive
vote.
change, a lot of positive social change over the centuries.
Look at this, a new pope for what, a year, and all of a sudden you guys are waving the Catholic banner. This is shoes on the other foot.
I'm pretty impressed by what he's saying. I'm telling you, and I'm not Catholic, but I'm thinking about it. David Lasker,
how
Neil
about the
Asbury.
Catholic Church view on abortion?
Yeah, well, I disagree with him on that. David and Neil, thank you both for being with us tonight.
Thank you, guys. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.